We're back on track. Sorry about that. Welcome back to our webinar. My name is Clorinda. Today we're going to be covering 5 advanced HubSpot features you're missing out on. We're going to tell you what those advanced features will be at the very beginning, but we'll start off with introductions. So my name is Clorinda. I'm going to be your host today. I've been working with the HubSpot software since 2017, which is pretty cool. And I've been with BBD Boom for about 2 years now, and I'm also a HubSpot certified trainer. Now, joining me today is Alison, which we're very, very excited to have. And she's the Senior Partner Development Manager at HubSpot. But Alison, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Clinton. Yeah, I currently work as a Senior Partner Development Manager at HubSpot. So I'm responsible for managing the relationship that we have with our partners in DACH and our partners in CEE. I've been at HubSpot many years, about 6 years now, started in their support team, moved into their onboarding team. More recently, I was working as a solutions engineer. And now I'm trying this whole partner management thing, which is going quite well. So yeah, I've had a lot of different use cases pop up in the last 6 years. So really excited to share a couple of interesting cases for you all to inspire you and see what more you can get out of HubSpot.
I've had a sneak peek at some of these and they're really interesting. So very excited to share these with you. So today we're going to be talking about these 5 HubSpot features. We're actually going to kind of ease you into it, starting with one of more of the simple ones and then going into the more complex ones. Now, some of these you might be somewhat familiar with, whether or not you are a HubSpot partner or someone that's new to HubSpot. But what we'll do is we'll talk about what these do and then just share with you some interesting use cases for each of these features as well. And we'll start off with the first one, which is lead scoring. So lead scoring is, I would say, fairly common if you are a business that has lots of inbound leads and you have your qualification criteria, especially on the marketing side of things. But the lead scoring tool is basically a HubSpot score type property. So basically the way it works is you can set up a scoring metric in HubSpot using the score type property. So if you're not familiar with that, if you're creating a brand new custom property in HubSpot and you have to choose a field type, it's basically the score one. And when you set that up, this is what you'll see on that right side where that screenshot is. That's what the setup looks like. But basically, you can apply scores to different types of data that you stored in HubSpot against a contact record. So it could be an engagement metric. It could be something that you've collected based on a form submission. And then you can apply scoring based on any of these values that you know about a contact. And based on the criteria, you could accumulate a output, which is a number. And the idea is that, for example, if you're doing an engagement quality score, the higher the score, the more engaged they generally would be. So usually this lead scoring tool is used to prioritize leads. But there's lots of different ways and unique ways that a lot of our clients and HubSpot customers are using as well. So just quickly with the common use cases, like I've mentioned, the engagement MQL, which stands for Marketing Qualified Lead Scoring, is a really common one. Basically, depending on how engaged your customers or your leads might be with your marketing activity, you could score them based on the engagement. On the ICP side, you could also score your company records based on specific ICP criteria. And if you want to go a further step, you can even combine these two together into one scoring metric. So for example, if a contact works for a company in a specific industry that is in your ICP, you could score that contact because they work for a specific company. But that being said, there are also some really interesting use cases that we've talked about. So the first one is the SQL scoring, which I'll talk about. And actually, I recently had this conversation with a colleague of mine, Shaq, and he actually worked with a client to put together an SQL scoring criteria alongside an MQL scoring criteria, which is quite interesting. And the reason why they did that was because they wanted to be able to measure the quality of the leads that were being qualified from marketing team and the sales team at the same time. So they basically wanted to be able to generate a report that looks at both scoring so that they could see whether or not the leads, the prospects were being scored properly and effectively. But that's my example. We have some additional use cases as well, which Alison, I'll let you talk about.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. Thank you for the great intro. So yeah, for the lead scoring, we've got all the flexibility in the world. We can set all the filters that we can set within our lists. And one thing that I always encouraged my customers to do when I was in the onboarding team is really lean into those activity filters. So you can really granularly break down the lead scoring criteria and define that a contact gets 5 points if they visited the pricing page and 5 times, or if they opened up a certain amount of marketing emails, we want to give them points. So really lean into those activity filters because they're a really great indicator for how that contact is engaging with you, especially when we're thinking about prioritizing certain leads or finding that ICP. Really, really lean into these activity filters. And then 2 additional use cases that I had pop up during my time at HubSpot. One was a health score or a happiness score. So essentially, I think a lot of times we think about lead scoring in exactly the way that it's defined. It's a lead that we're trying to score. But what
Yes.
about scoring our existing customers? So we can factor in CSAT feedback. We can factor in if they've got a certain number of email subscriptions, if they've been engaging with us. So this is really, really exciting too, that we can actually be scoring our customers and determine if they're healthy or not. And based on that, we can create a rating system. You can see that in the bottom graphic there. So really, really exciting stuff. And then an onboarding score could also be something. What is if we want to be tracking how successfully we're onboarding our customers? For example, maybe you're running some sort of app or some sort of website. So we want to be seeing if the customer completed certain tasks or if the customer activated certain features. So these are really cool use cases that I've seen customers put into practice, and it works really, really well.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. I think if anyone is interested in setting up lead scoring for unique use cases, I just wanted to mention that if you have HubSpot or if you're freshly using HubSpot, there is a property in the contact record called HubSpot Score, and that's a scoring type property that's default. But if you did want to create additional ones for different use cases, like in the examples here, you can create custom properties for those purposes as well and use them accordingly. And just as a side note, if anyone has any questions about any of these, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A. Depending on time, we'll try to answer as many as we can, but if not, we will have some contact details at the end for you to reach out to us if you've got any additional questions. But yes, that's lead scoring. So we'll move on to the next one, which is actually data formatting. So if you are someone that is using HubSpot's Operations Hub Pro, you may be somewhat familiar with some of these tools. But because Operations Hub is definitely one of the hubs that are not as commonly talked about, I thought it would be a really good one to share information on. So data formatting is kind of a vague term. There's a lot of different things you can do within Operations Hub to format your data, cleanse your data, and maintain your data as well. So these are just some of the examples that you can apply using Operations Hub Pro to clean your data. So if you're one of those HubSpot users that have a really large database, you're constantly creating new records from multiple different sources, integrations, form submissions, file imports, you're probably going to find that some of your data comes in pretty messy, especially if it's things like single line text fields and things like that that don't have a set list of options. So the ability to help you kind of format these using rules in HubSpot and workflows in HubSpot can be very, very helpful. So just some of the options in those bullet points there that you can do with Operations Hub Pro. You've got capitalized names, date formatting, numerical formulas, rounding up and down numbers, trimming white space, and there's a few others as well. Now, one of the other interesting things that you can do with your data formatting is using the workflows to format your data. So for example, if you're finding that people that generally submit specific values in a form submission, that kind of data tends to come in quite messy. You can actually use the workflow to trigger to kind of action the data formatting when someone submits a form, as an example. Now, within these workflows, you can also set up custom data formatting use cases. Like on the right side, you can see a couple of example formulas that I've pulled from HubSpot's knowledge base articles. And these are just some ideas of what you can actually implement to be able to produce interesting output. So the deals commission calculator as an example is actually really good. I'm sure a lot of people would find that one quite useful. The concatenating of string values, first name and last name, that's probably a very vague one, but as you can imagine, you can kind of string together all sorts of different single line text values or any other values as well together to produce a specific output. So just a really good one to know as well. Now, a couple more examples from Ellison as well, in terms of the ability to manage your data in Operations Hub. We've got in this side. So Ellison, I'll let you take up that one as well.
Perfect. Thank you. I think you did a really good job of introducing the different options that we have within the workflows. What I would say, I'd like to call out that HubSpot also has I'd say an easier data formatting automation option where you don't actually even have to go into workflows at all. So essentially, if you're navigating to your contacts, to your companies, there should be something on the top right around data quality. So there's some default settings that you can activate. So on the screenshot on the top, you see some of those default settings. And essentially, when you activate them, it means that every single contact that comes in, the first letter in the first name will be capitalized, and the first letter in the last name will be capitalized, and the email is going to be all in lowercase. So you can actually just activate that, check the box, don't need to set up a workflow at all.
Nice.
These are things that are already present out of the box. So if you want to test it out today, go for it. And another important call out too, in terms of data formatting, is we do have a dashboard, a data quality dashboard, which is really, really essential for just managing any of the data in your portal, making sure your portal is healthy, making sure the data is good. And so that data quality dashboard will actually show you if you've got some sort of formatting issues, what these exact issues are. So have a look at the data quality dashboard. There's a few other really interesting reports in there that really just help ensure that your portal is staying as clean as possible, because only with clean data can we really productively work and interact with our contacts.
Thanks. In terms of the deduplication tools as well, with Operations Hub, just keep in mind that you have the mass deduplication, which is really helpful. But if you do have Pro Hub on other licenses like marketing or sales, you do have some aspect of the deduplication tool as well, just not at mass. So there is a deduplication tool where you can manually review records that HubSpot has identified as a potential duplicate. So if you go into your contact dashboard, top right corner of the old navigation menu or the existing navigation menu, you'll be able to see and kind of actions and deduplication tool on the top right corner of that page. Hopefully I'm explaining that well enough, but just keep that in mind if you just want to have a look at some of these features before you go into Ops Hub Pro as well. Okay, moving on to the next one. Just got a, oops, sorry about that. Q&A. SQL scoring. Okay, Tammy, yeah, definitely. I'll be able to share a few more details with you on that. We're just going to take some of your information, and then actually I might be able to give you a bit more insight outside of the webinar, but thank you. That's a really good question. Okay, moving on, we've got the next one, which is the deal pipeline rules. Okay, so this is actually, I wouldn't say it's an advanced feature, but it is a fairly new feature that I think will be extremely useful to a lot of people and a lot of customers that are currently using the sales pipelines. So before I go into the new features, a couple of things that I wanted to mention, if you're not yet aware, is in HubSpot, when you set up a sales pipeline, you are able to add required properties at specific stages. So what this means is if you have a sales pipeline with, say, 5 stages, let's pretend we're looking at that sales pipeline on the very top of that screenshot there. When a sales rep moves a deal from one stage to another, you can set it up so that if they move a deal, let's say from appointment scheduled to qualified to buy, they would be required to fill in specific deal property values before they're allowed to move it to the next stage. So that's been a really, really useful tool because it helps you make sure that you've got the right data in there so that when the sale's closed, the onboarding team or the delivery team has the information they need to be able to proceed with that onboarding process. Now, a couple of issues that came up because of that is it's great that we have all these required properties, but what people might tend to do is they could skip stages. And by skipping stages, they would also be able to skip those required properties. So this new update with the ability to prevent people from skipping stages is extremely useful because now it kind of helps you to prevent those kind of loopholes from happening. And the reason why we usually recommend the ability to, not being able to skip stages, which I would say apply in lots of cases, but not every single one, is that you would then be able to produce really useful reports from a sales perspective. So a really common report that our sales hub customers like to look at is funnel reports. So you can actually look at conversion rates from one stage to another. So if you want to see, out of the 50 deals from appointment scheduled, how many % of that became qualified to buy, you'd be able to produce a funnel report, which is a out-of-the-box report that HubSpot does have. But that report does get skewed when you have deal skipping stages, going backwards. And so that is why we normally recommend having your sales pipelines as linear as possible so that everyone can follow those specific stages from one end to the other. So of course, the other update is the ability to prevent deals from going backwards in the deal stage. When it goes to the next stage, it can't go back. And then in the third point there, it's basically explaining what I've mentioned before, which is if you can skip stages, you can skip required properties. So by not allowing you to skip stages, you have to fill in all the required properties. Yeah, and then moving on from there, we also have a couple more deal pipeline rules in place, which I'll let Alison talk through as well.
Exactly. So Clarinda explained the first three rules, and there's two additional rules. One of them is limit deal creation to a single stage. So pretty evident what that does. Reps are only allowed to create deals in certain stages. So we, of course, want to make sure that the reps are going through a clean sales process, that the customer or the contact in that case follows all the right steps to be able to be qualified for the deal. So this is really, really important. We want to make sure that our reps aren't creating these deals in a later stage. So this is something that you can also activate to ensure that every single deal, for example, starts with the demo scheduled, or every single deal starts with the first meeting scheduled, something like that. I think that's a really, really important setting as well. And again, this just ties back into the whole reporting aspect. So we really want to make sure that our deals are following all the right steps so that we can accurately report on that, and maybe also spot where there is significant delays, where we can spot if there's any gaps in the process. And another important setting that we launched is the control deal editing access. So essentially what that means is if we have a deal move into a certain stage, we can actually configure it in a way that only certain people can now edit that deal in that stage. So essentially, maybe there's a certain stage where only someone more senior, or maybe someone from the onboarding team, or maybe someone from the contracts team should only be able to make changes to the deal. So in that way, we can also limit the editing access for deals in certain stages. So definitely check it out. I think these are really useful settings. I have heard these being asked for a very, very long time. So excited to see this launch now.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, that's a really good point. Of course, at different deal stages, we'll have different roles sometimes. Quote sending, quote approvals, things like that might require an additional person. So it's good to have those editing access in place. Right, moving on to the next one. We have programmable email. So we're starting to get into the more complex, really, really advanced tools. So I'll try to explain this as well as I can. But hopefully the use cases that we're going to share with you will give you a bit more context as to how they can be used. Because basically the next two tools that I'll be talking about basically opens a door to a lot of different things that you can customize in HubSpot. Just regarding your request, Steve, I don't think I'm able to expand the graphics at the moment, but what we'll actually do is after we finish this webinar, we will send you a copy of the slides. So if you did want to zoom in on those, hopefully that will be able to give you a bit more context as to what you're looking at. But yeah, apologies if you can't see everything clearly. With the programmable email, so what this allows you to do is it allows you to create kind of custom coded modules in your marketing emails, which basically allows you to pull data from record activity as well as HubDB tables. So basically this allows you to enable your marketing content to be a lot more relevant for your prospects and potentially your customers as well. So to explain this more clearly, I'm going to explain a couple of use cases that we've looked at in the past, as well as some examples that I've identified from HubSpot. And Alison actually has some really cool use cases as well. So after that, I'll hand it over to her. But the first one is new property listing. So we've got a screenshot example on the right side there. And basically, if you, let's say, are working in the real estate industry and you sell property, what you could potentially be doing is putting together a database, potentially using a HubDB table of all the properties that you're listing. And those property listings can be categorized by various fields. So things like the location of the property, how many bedrooms they have, how many bathrooms they have, I don't know, neighborhood ratings, whatever you have, you can put them all in the table. And then what you can do with these programmable emails is you can send out an email with those modules in there. And depending on who receives those emails and what sort of properties they're interested in, they could be then looking at the properties that are relevant to them rather than just showing them everything that you've got on your website. So if you've got 5 listings on there and the person that's viewing this email is interested in only properties with 5 bedrooms, that module could potentially only show them listings with 5 bedrooms, as an example. The second one is consultant lookup and matching. So this is an interesting use case that we've worked with a client on recently. So in this case, the client is a business that works with certifications to keep businesses compliant. And depending on the industry or the business that their customers are, sometimes the complexity level of what certifications they need to stay compliant can be quite complicated. And so those customers would work with consultants to make sure that they stay compliant, and then they work hand in hand with our clients to make sure that they've got the correct certifications. So what this means is our client basically has a network of consultants that they work with, and they would recommend these consultants to their potential customers depending on their needs. So if their customer, let's say, works in the construction industry and they need specific certifications, but they just need a consultant to help them clarify their requirements, they would then go to their consultant database and then recommend these consultants to the customers based on their industry and their region. So what you can do in this case is put together a consultant database in a HubDB table. It could be maybe from a custom object that you've created as well, depending on your use case. And then based on the context customer's request, you could send an email with a list of consultants that are relevant to them based on the industry, the region, and any other thing that you can categorize those consultants under. So those are two recent use cases that we've looked at recently. The next two are quite common ones, I would say. So the latest news, if you have a blog that you have on your website, then you could potentially be creating a programmable email module to show them the latest blog post that you've got on your website and just feed that straight into your email. And then with the last viewed product, e-commerce, if you work with e-commerce or if you have product listings on your website, you can track those engagement activity, the page views that you have on those web pages. And depending on the last viewed pages or last viewed product pages, you could then create a programmable email to remind them that they've just seen this product not too long ago, and would you like to get more information about these products? Would you like to revisit, or would you like to complete your purchase? So a few interesting use cases there. And there's just so many other things you can do with programmable emails, including a few other use cases that I'll let Alison talk about.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's just important to call out programmable email also available for marketing professional. My personal opinion, there's way more power in it if you connect it to HubDB, which is going to be available to our marketing enterprise and our CMS Pro/enterprise customers. So HubDB, if you haven't heard that terminology before, it's a data table that you essentially use, and that data table can be referenced from emails using the Hubble syntax. It can also be referenced from pages. And so, yeah, if you really want to have the real power of programmable emails, HubDB for me is a bit of a requirement there to really make it as powerful as it can be. So in terms of use cases, the first two are also pretty in line with what Clarina was explaining earlier. So imagine you're a recruiting company or you do some sort of hiring, and you've got different types of candidates in the system, and maybe they applied for a role, but they didn't end up getting the role. But essentially, if you've got new roles coming in that fit the profile, you want to make sure that you're informing them, and you're not going to sit down and look at Clarinda's contact record and figure out that she was interested in being a marketing analyst. Yeah, exactly. And so essentially what we can do with the programmable emails is program that logic so that we send out one email to our, I don't know, 100,000 candidates or 100,000 contacts, and based off of us referencing properties from within the contact record, but also looking at what job types we have available in the HubDB and making that matching and creating that logic, we can send out these really tailored and customized emails. And the next one is also pretty clear there. So imagine you once went to a Adele concert or a Taylor Swift concert or a Beyonce concert. That system knows that you went to these different types of concerts. So as any good event company or concert company would do, we want to make sure that you're buying tickets again. So we can then create these customized emails that, again, create these personalized recommendations that are very specific to the contact based off of what we know about them and based off of what we have to offer. And with programmable emails, we can just create that matching with each other. The next and final example,
I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, when I was showing the Clarina the slide, she's like, what do you mean? Like, what could this mean? So really interesting and niche use case, but maybe you can translate it over to your business in some way or the other. So I think it was when I was working in onboarding, I had a customer, and the customer's business model was that they provided refrigerators with foods like yogurts and orange juice and sandwiches to companies. And so employees could go to these fridges, they then would open up the fridge, they would take the sandwich, and then there was like a little barcode scanner. So they would scan that they as an employee took the specific sandwich out of the fridge at that specific
That's
point in time.
crazy.
Yeah, great business model. Love it. I think we need that as well. How does HubSpot fit into that? So this customer, they were looking to, at the end of the day, always send like a reminder email to the employees saying like, hey, there's still 3 apples and 2 orange juices and 1 turkey sandwich and a chocolate muffin in the fridge. And so we were just like breaking our heads about like how exactly we could solve for that. Enter programmable emails in HubDB. And so essentially the logic that the customer could implement was, as soon as somebody scans that barcode from the fridge, we know that that item doesn't exist anymore. And so we then from their system trigger our HubDB API and maybe set the product as inactive or non-available anymore. And then we have a workflow running, a recurring workflow running that runs every day at 4 p.m. That then again, based off of what we see in the HubDB table, based off of the information that we are pulling from that refrigerator, what food still exists and what food doesn't exist, we can then send an email out to the contacts with the food that's still left in the fridge, or even more personalized. If we know that Clarinda got an apple for the last 5 days, maybe let's send her an email and let her know that there's still 1 single apple left and that she should run over to the fridge. So
Isn't that
really,
crazy?
yeah, really
This is,
interesting use case. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know why I'm most excited about this one because it's not like I'm going to get a customer with food and fridges anytime soon, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was so cool.
Yeah, it's just interesting to know. So think about real time. HubDB API, we update these tables in real time. So essentially, when you're creating some sort of workflow that sends an email out every day at a certain time, it's in real time. We can send personalized emails every single day that are automatically updated based off of these programmable email logics.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, so moving on to the last one, custom coded actions. So what this is you can set up custom coded actions, and it's basically a workflow feature, and it basically extends the capabilities of the workflow functionality within HubSpot, and you can actually use it to pull information from outside of HubSpot as well. So it's also one of those things where it's quite difficult to explain technically how it works. So hopefully these use cases will give you some context as to what you can do with the custom coded actions. Before I run through some of these examples, I just want to quickly talk about the use case library. So we will be sharing with you a PDF to this file and you can click it, but there's a URL in there as well. If you're interested in various ways that HubSpot has, or other businesses or HubSpot partners have used custom coded actions, there is actually a library where you can even access the code that they used in those custom coded action workflows. So I'd highly recommend looking and scrolling through those examples if you're interested, but these are just some of the examples in that use case library. So the first one is turning the full name into the first and last name. Pretty straightforward. Email address validation, very common use case for sure. Just to improve your engagement rates, your reduce your bounce rates, and so on. Weighted lead rotation is quite an interesting one. So currently in HubSpot, as you know, you can do a lead rotation. So for example, if you've got 5 sales reps and you've got 100 leads, you would do 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, evenly split. But you can't do it in a weighted way currently. So what that actually does is you can say, right, I've got 3 sales reps. I want the first one to get 50% of the leads and the other 2 to 25%. So you can actually build a custom coded workflow to make sure that the leads get sorted in that weighted criteria that you have. The next one is completing all tasks of a closed deal. So a very common issue that we see with a lot of customer portals is that there are lots of basically outstanding tasks that never get checked off because once you close the deal, people just tend to forget about it. So this is a really great way just to maintain the data in HubSpot, make sure all the tasks that need to be closed off are closed off. And finally, the automation of renewal management. I won't go into too much detail with this, but just think about the possibilities you can look at with duplicating deals when a date's been hit, as an example, and then copying information over from one deal to another. So there's just so many things you can do with custom coded actions. But yes, I'm going to go over to the next one with some additional use cases from Alison as well.
Perfect, exactly. And definitely click on the link that I linked there, because one of my ex-colleagues from the solutions engineering team also created a pretty cool use case library. And so he's got also code examples that you can literally
Oh,
copy
nice.
paste with instructions on how to implement it. So one of the first cases, it's not a specific use case. I guess it kind of is. One of my other partner agencies, they're a massive fan of actually doing all types of integrations with all different systems, just with custom coded actions, because we can execute Python and JavaScript, interact with APIs. It's a really easy low code integration solution. So think about that as well. Instead of building a formalized set API integration, think about like if there's certain triggers that should trigger the integration, similar to the webhooks functionality. So yeah, low code integration, connect your application to HubSpot. And then within the use case library for my colleague, there is code that lets you put a ChatGPT action into the workflow. So we can then interact with ChatGPT directly in the workflow, ask it questions. So there's tons of different use cases off the back of it, but I think there's so much power there with ChatGPT right in a workflow. Endless possibilities, if you ask me. Another really interesting one is the sentiment analysis with Service Hub. And so essentially what that does is every time that we have a customer reach out to us via email, via ticketing system, we put that ticket, that conversation through a workflow, and there's a certain API that we trigger and push that information to that API. And within that API, there's the option to do a sentiment analysis. So if somebody's saying, hey, yeah, thank you so much, I love your product, that's a good sign. If somebody's saying, I hate you, please refund me, this didn't go well at all, we can then already stamp the ticket as maybe being a little bit more of a sensitive ticket, or maybe a happy customer ticket. So we can really already use the workflow actions to analyze what's happening in the ticket. And based off of that, maybe we can prioritize if someone's really angry, if they're using bad swear words or something like that. Maybe we can tag them like that and escalate them to someone more senior. And another big one that we talked about yesterday too, out of office
Yes.
reassignment. We know it's
Yeah.
not great at HubSpot as of yet. So you can also do some sort of action, some sort of programming that before any lead gets rotated, ticket gets rotated, however, we use some sort of distribution system that you have in place, we first have an out of office check. So maybe we ping the Workday API or the Personio API or whatever HR system you're using. And then based off of what we get back, what employees are present, which ones are working today, which ones aren't working today, only then do we distribute, because otherwise it's a little bit of a pain in the butt at the moment. So this
Yeah,
is
having
really
to bulk
interesting.
assign and everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, those are really cool use cases. ChatGPT, I guess, that kind of opens so many doors as well, which is crazy. Right, the last use case we wanted to share before we end off, and I'm so sorry we're running a little bit over, but we will share the recording with you. But this is, I thought, quite an interesting use case that I've seen over and over again. If you use Commerce Hub, this might not be as useful to you because you have your payments reporting and things like that. But for anyone in the EMEA region who are still easing into Commerce Hub or maybe not using Commerce Hub yet, we have a bit of a limitation with the recurring revenue reporting currently. If you use Sales Hub Enterprise, you do have access to the recurring revenue reporting dashboard, but that also still has some limitations. So we actually did have a client that wanted to be able to forecast on recurring revenue reports. So for example, if they have a contract that runs from January to December with a monthly billed amount, they were not basically able to use the MRR value in HubSpot to produce a report to see how much money was actually being generated every month. So as a workaround for that, we put together a custom coded workflow, which basically allowed us to create a new custom revenue object in HubSpot that's split out by months. So basically, if a deal has a 12-month contract, as soon as a sales rep puts in the contract information and the monthly amount, it would then trigger the ability to create 12 separate revenue custom records with those monthly dates and values so that we can use that data to then generate a report that looks like something what you see on the left side. On top of that, we will also be able to stack within the revenue report which of that revenue was recurring revenue, as well as which one of that revenue was one-time revenue as well, which is quite useful. So yeah, it's really interesting use case in terms of recurring revenue reporting. If you're someone that works in SaaS or has recurring revenue reports that you need to generate from renewable contracts, this could be something to consider as well with the custom coded workflow. So what I'll say is with the programmable emails and the custom coded actions, so obviously these are quite technically advanced options. If you're not sure if something that you're looking at is viable or not, that's what you've got a HubSpot partner for. You can reach out to us and just see if that's an option. We can help you scope it out and see if it's viable. But that being said, that basically concludes today's webinar. Thank you for being patient with us at the beginning, even though we dropped out. I don't think we have any more time to answer any specific questions today. However, I have our contact details down here. You can send me an email directly, or you can look us up on LinkedIn. You can just search our names directly on there, and you should be able to find us. And then if you've got any questions, we can help answer them there, or we can continue the conversation in a separate call. But thank you so much for your time spent with us. Thank you so much, Alison, for agreeing to join us on this webinar as well. It's been really, really useful and really interesting.
Of course. Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.